iHeart, get ready. Fantasy football is here. Welcome to the Scout Fantasy Show. ScoutFantasy.com is home to the Fantasy Football World Championships and the best players in the world. Real money winners giving their secrets to help you win. Now exclusively on iHeart. This is the Scout Fantasy Show with your host, the one, the only, Dr. Roto.
This is Dr. Roto from Scout Fantasy Sports, and welcome to today's podcast. Let's take a look at some news before we talk about the Boston Red Sox. First of all, Carlos Santana was on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio this morning talking to our friends Craig Mish and Cliff Floyd, and you know what he said? I'm going to be playing some outfield this year in 2017. What? I knew he played a little catcher. I knew he played some third base. I didn't know he was going to play outfield. But that's why you need to listen to Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio. That's a great nugget of information. Look, Santana's valuable, certainly at first base, which is very thin this year, and certainly now in the outfield, which could always be thin, especially in deeper leagues. So he's got uses. Remember, when a guy plays multiple positions, they have multiple uses, right? And you can plug them in when you need them. All right, the Reds signed Desmond Jennings to a minor league contract. I think he makes the team. I do. I think he makes it as a fifth outfielder. I don't know what to expect. I don't really think that much of him, but I think he does make the team. Glenn Perkins, discomfort in that throwing shoulder. That's not good. Brandon Kinsler looking like the Twins closer. Glenn Perkins, if you were hoping that he was going to do something, I think you're going to see very little from him this year. And the Twins also sent Byung-Ho Park to AAA Rochester. Yeesh. What is that all about? I mean, remember how much we liked him last year? I know I liked him last year, but not this year. I still think the Rays should go for Park. I think he would help that team immeasurably. All right. Time now today to take a look at the Boston Red Sox. That's right, the Sox. Boston. Home of my father-in-law's favorite team. And yes, the man is the biggest Red Sox fan I know. He wears Red Sox garb when he goes to Yankee Stadium. Not a good life decision, but what can I tell you? That's what he does. All right, at catcher, the Red Sox have a little bit of a situation here. Blake Swihart they like, and they think highly of, but he really hasn't shown that much so far, right? He really hasn't shown, he's got potential, he's got unlimited potential, but it hasn't really happened for him yet. So right now, Sandy Leon looks like he's going to be their starting catcher. And I think that he's probably the safest bet to see the most time there. So I don't know whether you see 100 games, but he's coming into the season as their starting catcher. And look, the guy hit 7 home runs last year, hit 310. He's 27 years old. He's in his prime. Look, I think this guy could be decent. I think it's a little bit of a mess here. And if I was in an AL-only league and I had a last pick of a draft and I could put a buck on Swihart, I'm not against that, especially if they move him. See, if the Red Sox like Leon and they decide to move Swihart, I could see Swihart ending up as a starting catcher in 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 different places. And I think Swihart's a chip for the Red Sox when they're going for it. So they'll hold on to Swihart as much as possible. If I'm them, I put him in AAA. I let him rake, let him hit 320 in AAA. Then the trade deadline comes, and I move him for a pitcher or something that I need, maybe a third baseman. You'll see. But I think that's the move with Swihart. In the offseason, the team signed Mitch Moreland. And Mitch Moreland is a guy that he is exactly, as Herman Edwards would say, or as Dennis Green, can't remember, he's exactly who you think he is. He hits righties. He will hit you about anywhere from 230 to 270. He'll hit about 20 some odd home runs and about 60 to 80 RBIs. He's not going to set the world on fire. He's not going to steal any bases. But if you need him against righties, he will do his job. He will hit 7th or 8th in that order, and he will be effective. The other first baseman, as we know, is Hanley Ramirez. So I think that we're going to see more DH. When there's a righty, I think you'll see Hanley playing DH. When there's a lefty, I think you'll see Hanley at first base. And then at that point, that's when Chris Young comes into play because nobody hits a lefty like Chris Young, right? So I don't know how it goes in the outfield, or maybe Chris Young DHs, but I absolutely think you see Chris Young playing every day against a lefty. So Mitch Moreland's in against righties, Chris Young against lefties, Hanley Ramirez goes to first base against lefties. I like Hanley this year. This is his team. Now, we could say this is Pedroia's team and Bogart's team. I get that, but I really think this is Hanley's team. I think that David Ortiz groomed Hanley Ramirez to be the leader of this team. I went to a bunch of Red Sox games last year because I live down right by their spring training site, and I'm telling you that he and David Ortiz were like blood brothers. They were hanging out. They were talking all the time. Ortiz was just filling him with information, and he was soaking it up like a sponge, Hanley. So I think this is a good year for Hanley. He's going to need to be their big bopper. I think he does a good job of that. I like him a lot this year. At second base, there's the man. He's been around forever. His name is Dustin Pedroia, and you know him. I think he's slightly overvalued in certain drafts, and then at the same time, I think he's slightly undervalued in drafts. So how can I say that he's overvalued and undervalued? How does that even make sense? Well, I think when a guy like that plays in Boston, everybody knows him, right? And when people know you, they draft you high. Guy can hit 300, 310, 15 home runs, steal 5 or 10 bases, whatever it takes. People know him. But in an industry league, in an expert league, people don't look at a guy like Dustin Pedroia and have him high on their list, right? He's older, the arrow's pointing toward the middle, maybe even moving a little downward. So you can get him in certain leagues at a discount, but in other leagues, if you're playing right now in Quincy, Massachusetts, or in the Newton or the Lexington, Massachusetts League, Dustin Pedroia is going to be an early pick, right? You and I both know that. So I think you should gauge Pedroia as you gauge the other owners in your league. Xander Bogaerts is turning into a very good young player. I mean, the guy scored 115 runs last year. He stole 13 bases, hit close to 300. But he had 652 at-bats, so the guy was pretty healthy all year. But he is turning into a phenomenal player. I was worried that he didn't have the power. I'm wrong. He does have the power. So I really like what I'm seeing there with Xander Bogaerts. He's a third to fourth round pick in any league. I'm a fan. Okay, I think you've got Francisco Lindor for sure, but I can find some love for Bogaerts. I really could. I could find some love for Bogaerts. I think he's a guy who's in that the top echelon of that position. Certainly you've got Correa, you've got Corey Seager, right? You've got Lindor, and I think Bogaerts is in that equation. So he's a guy that should be high on your list. Now, I do think that middle infield is deep this year, so I wouldn't go spending too much money on him, but I think that there's absolute value with him, and I do like him very much. The next player I want to talk about is, of course, third base, Pablo Sandoval. I'm not sold on Pablo Sandoval, okay? They said that he's lost weight, he looks good, blah, 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 blah. I'm not buying it. He hasn't had a good year since 2011, and I'm not kidding. Look it up. 2011. That's the last time he was actually a good hitter. Since then, he's just been, borderline. I mean, not special in the least. So I guess there's always a story out of spring training. Oh, this guy looks better. He lost about 50 pounds. All right, but if he can't hit a fastball, what do I care? I mean, if Panda was he was a great hitter for the Giants, and he was a great playoff hitter. So I'm not going to take anything away from him. But that said, I'm not putting him on my fantasy team. There's no way this guy's going to my fantasy team. I can't imagine it. Even if I had a last pick, I'm not taking him. Now, Brock Holt is an interesting guy because he can fill in a lot of positions. I think certainly in an AL-only league, I like where Brock Holt goes with that. You could put him in third base, second base, shortstop, outfield, plug and play as needed. All right, in the outfield, the first guy, I mentioned Chris Young. We talked a little bit about Chris Young. He's not going to get a lot of at-bats. You guys know that, but he's going to play against lefties. I certainly like him in DFS. So when they play against a lefty, Chris Young is always on my radar. That doesn't mean I always play him, but I'm interested. Andrew Benintendi is a kid that's going to get a lot of play this year, and he's a guy who I took in the 10th round of the FSTA draft, And I think his value is going to go higher because this is a real player. This guy can really hit the baseball. And I think there's a reasonable chance that this guy hits second in the lineup, right? So if you're starting with Pedroia and you have Benintendi and then you go to, Bogarts and then Mookie Betts and Hanley Ramirez, I'm liking that. He's going to see a lot of fastballs. So don't be surprised to see Benintendi going higher in your drafts as we get closer to March and April. I think that's going to happen. I think that's going to happen a lot. So I think Benintendi is a guy, as I call it, a climber, a draft climber. Okay? Jackie Bradley had an absolute renaissance last year. He was terrific. Still strikes out a lot, but man, they'll never take him out of the lineup because his defense is insane. Struck out 143 times last year, but the dude jacked out 26 home runs, had close to 90 RBIs, and he hit 267. So look, if he can improve his contact rate, you might be looking at one of the top players in all of baseball. I mean, certainly defensively, this guy is a Gold Glover. Gold Glover. All right, Mookie Betts, and I always like to joke, this is the guy that Tommy G was wrong about. How good is Mookie Betts? I mean, last year, 30 home runs, close to 25 stolen bases, had 113 RBIs, 122 runs scored. I mean, this is an AL MVP. This is an MVP candidate. Hit 318. What doesn't he do? Now, look, he played 672 at-bats. That's a lot of at-bats. But he's not playing in the World Baseball Classic. I'm pretty happy to see that. And I think this is a guy who's just getting better and better. Now, my question is this. If they move him to cleanup in the order, is he going to try to jack out home runs? If he does, watch the power spike, but watch the stolen bases go down slightly. I'm worried about that. Just a little bit worried about that. But I still love Mookie Betts, and certainly in drafts, he's a top 3 pick. Probably a top 2 pick, but I mean, top 3 for sure. Maybe if you want Chris Bryant or Arenado or something like that, but I like Mookie Betts a lot. All right, the pitching staff is sensational. I really have to give a lot of credit to the Red Sox. Chris Sale, bringing in Chris Sale, you've got a number 1 starter, and you move David Price to number 2, which I think helps this team out big time, because I don't think David Price is a 1. I think David Price is better used as a 2. So you go Sale, then Price. Then you've got Rick Porcello, who, by the way, how long has Rick Porcello been around for? We've heard of Rick Porcello for years. Years, guys. You don't realize this. Rick Porcello was pitching at 20 years old in the Detroit Tigers organization. Right? In 2009, the guy had 31 starts when Jimmy Leland was coaching. And then he really didn't do that much, but he found his groove last year. 193 innings and 193 hits and 223 innings. 189 strikeouts to 32 walks. Those are really good numbers. Those are really good numbers. So I'm a fan of Rick Porcello. I like Sale, I like Price, I like Porcello. I love Eduardo Rodriguez. I do. I think this guy's got a big-time arm. Right? And I know that Dave Dombrowski thinks very highly of him. Now, Adam Ronis thinks that they may send him down. That may be because I think Drew Pomeranz is absolutely the 4th starter in this team. Absolutely the 4th starter on this team. But I think the question is Stephen Wright. Now, Stephen Wright may make it because the following. Sale, Price, and Pomeranz are all lefties. If you have Eduardo Rodriguez and Henry Owens, you have more lefties. So they might leave Wright there and leave Rodriguez down in the minors and bring him up. That does make some sense. That does make some sense. Okay? The bullpen, Craig Kimbrell is terrific. Terrific. Tyler Thornburg is probably the best reliever you've never heard of. And God forbid something should happen to Kimbrell. This guy can close. 67 innings last year, 90 strikeouts. His whip was .94. .94. Okay? I mean, that is unreal. They've got Joe Kelly. They've got Robbie Ross. I mean, this is a deep team. So I think Kimbrell's in a perfect position, right? Perfect position to just come in and do his 1-inning thing, right? Because they can go with Robbie Ross, Thornburg, Kelly, Matt Barnes has a good arm. They don't need to overuse Kimbrell. And they're going to need him. They're going to need him as the season gets longer. So really, the Red Sox are in a terrific position to succeed in the American League. I'd love to see a little more power, and I think that they trade Swihart to get more power, maybe for another outfielder or a third baseman. I don't know, or a first baseman. We'll have to see, but I think Swihart is the chip that they use. Maybe Swihart and Brian Johnson, Swihart and Henry Owens. I mean, what team wouldn't want Swihart and Owens for a bopper? I think some team would do that. Okay? But you know what I want you to do? I want you to go to scoutfantasy.com. I want you to enter the promo code ROTO. That's ROTO. You pay for 1 month, we get you 2 more for free. That's how we roll at Scout. And when you get there, you're going to get access to some of our amazing, amazing winners. Sean Childs, high stakes winner. Adam Ronas, big time expert winner. The guy won Tout Wars the last 2 years. What more needs to be said? The guy won Tout Wars. That's the best of the best. And then, of course, you got me, Dr. Roto. You know how much I like to win leagues, so you got 3 of the top people out there helping you in fantasy baseball, and we're helping you win. So if you go there, you pay for 1 month, you get 2 more for free. You drop the promo code ROTO, R-O-T-O, and we hook you up, especially for DFS. Our message board communities are great. People are excited. They love being part of Scout Fantasy, and I hope you will as well, and I encourage you to do so. All right, guys, there we have it. The Boston Red Sox podcast is done, but we'll be back next week. That's how we roll. We'll continue with one team, one day, one team, as we move forward, as the season gets closer. Have a great weekend. Be well. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Scout Fantasy Show. There's never been a better time to join the Scout Army. Visit scoutfantasy.com. Use the promo ROTO for 2 months free. And don't forget, fantasy players, please thumbs up the podcast on the iHeart app. See you next time. Go Scouts!